Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Arise with Sally Goodwin. Let me just position myself correctly. We all know the drill. Every morning, I sit in the same place, but somehow the positioning always looks slightly different, and I don't understand why at all. Trying to get the light and the mic and the everything else all in the right place. Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Arise with Sally Goodwin on this beautiful Thursday morning. It is a stunning day here in Cape Town. Looks like it's going to be another scorcher, which is lovely for many, many people. But I just, since being in my 50s and since menopause, I just do not enjoy the scorching heat anymore. It's just one of those things, you know. So it's a beautiful day, and thank the Lord in the early mornings when I do these lives, it's still fairly cool. But the scorching heat of the day to come is just it's just not something I look forward to. Good morning, beautiful Ethne. Lovely to see you, my friend. Good morning, Arena. Oh wow, okay. So Arena's Joshua started grade 1 yesterday. Wow. You know, I know this is such a cliche and everybody says it, and when you're in the midst of it, it doesn't feel like this, but it goes so quickly. It goes so quickly. My youngest is turning 21 this year, and so he matriculated not last year, the year before. And I basically figured out that from the moment my eldest started grade 1 until the moment my youngest matriculated, I had been a school mom. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened to the internet there. I had been a school mom for 20-something years. 20 years, exactly 20 years I had been a school mom. Doing stationery, books, uniform, driving to and from school for 20 years. And when I was in the midst of it, I thought it was never going to end, you know, and you go through those stages where there are two different schools, you know, one or two of them are at the high school and one or two of them are still at the junior school. And it's just, I thought it was never ever going to end. And then suddenly it does. You know, suddenly my youngest matriculated, and it was like, a whole era of my life was over. And I had a moment, kind of I don't think you can call it a midlife crisis. Good morning, beautiful Jen. But morning, Stu, lovely to see you on this with all the ladies. But yeah, I really I was quite looking forward to my little one who's 6 foot something, finishing school, because he didn't love school. And so getting him through school was like pushing a rock uphill. Good morning, Rose, beautiful friend. It's always such an honor when you watch me. It's such an honor and a privilege. I love you so much. Rose has been my mentor and my friend and my support and my encourager for just the longest time, and almost everything that I am, I owe to being under Rose's ministry and just being able to receive from her prophetically and receive training from her and just her constant love and encouragement and support. And so Rose is just a pioneer for women in ministry, for the prophetic. She is a gatekeeper in the city. And she's just an amazing person who I'm privileged to call my friend. So anyway, yes. So I was saying my youngest wasn't the most conscientious scholar, and it was quite a challenge getting him through all 12 years of school. But when it was finished, I didn't know what to do, because for 20 years, part of my identity had been school mom, you know, and then suddenly that's over. But it's so amazing how God transitions you into new eras in your life, into new spaces in your life, if you allow him to. And the one thing for all you mums out there, for all you ladies who are transitioning from one period to the next, or from one era to the next, or from one stage to the next, a very wise person told me once, always allow yourself to grieve the ending. It's incredible to be excited about a new beginning, and we must be excited about new beginnings, but allow yourself to grieve the ending, because every new beginning means the end of something else. And sometimes we feel like we should be so excited about the new beginnings that we don't actually allow ourselves to grieve the end of things, Anyway, okay. So, as you all know, those of you who have been watching me regularly for the last few weeks, we are just, I released a prophetic word for 2022, and we are basically just going through some of the things that were in that prophetic word, and we are just looking at them a little bit more closely in light of what God had revealed to me that I didn't have time to put all into one prophetic word. So this morning, we are looking at Proverbs 20, verse 22. Proverbs 20, verse 22. Just to remind you, lovely ladies and gentlemen, that I do these live videos from my home. And as I've said to you before, I have 2 dogs, 2 boys still living here, a husband and a cat. And inevitably, one of them is going to make some sort of noise at some point in time. So if you hear weird noises in the background, or I have to quickly jump up and open the door to let my dog out, please just excuse me. Okay, so Proverbs 20, verse 22. And this is what it says. Do not say, I will repay evil. Wait expectantly for the Lord, and he will rescue you. Do not say, I will repay evil. Wait expectantly for the Lord, and he will rescue you. And you might be thinking, what on earth has that got to do with us these days, But remember, as part of my prophetic word, I released, and some of what I released in my prophetic word, as I said to you in the prophetic word, are words that I've actually brought previously, because God isn't confined to 365 days in the year, and some of the things that we are going through are seasons. And I was explaining to you how this decade, this decade of the 2020s and the Hebrew decade of the 5780s is the decade of the letter Pei, and Pei is mouth. So the picture for the letter Pei is a mouth, and I won't go into all the Hebrew explanation for it, because it's quite lengthy and hard to understand if I can't draw you a diagram. But basically, the essence of what comes out of the 80s, the 5780s, is that what is hidden in the heart will be revealed. The saying is, what is hidden in the home will be revealed in the public space, but it can be interpreted as what is hidden in the heart will be revealed through the mouth. What is not dealt with in the secret place will be exposed in public, and we're in a decade of that happening. All of the things that we are seeing exposed, the Jeffrey Epstein's and the Prince Andrews and the church scandals and the thing, all of these things, we're in a decade of exposure where things are going to be exposed and brought to the light. But it operates obviously on a large scale in terms of leadership and things like that, and structures and systems that we have put our faith in apart from God, which he is not fond of. But it also comes all the way down to us as individuals. And so I just wanted, because when we read something like that, do not say, I will repay evil, wait expectantly for the Lord and he will rescue you. We reminded, which is the point of the scripture, we're reminded of Deuteronomy, where God says, vengeance is mine, says the Lord. Vengeance is mine. And I think that sometimes we think of vengeance as kind of, you sort of think to yourself, well, I'm not in a gang. I'm not in a culture or a society or a space where vengeance is taken physically. So we no longer, in our sort of society or in our culture, we no longer in a space where you draw swords at dawn or have a duel at dawn or anything like that. We don't think of vengeance in terms of ourselves necessarily, because we don't see it as, we just don't live in a culture like that. We understand that that is gang culture. We understand that that is prison culture. We understand the vengeance culture in other cultures, but we don't see it in our own culture necessarily because we just don't live like that. But I want to just look at a few verses that go along with that Proverbs 20:22. And so I want to start by going to the Old Testament and looking at 2 Samuel 16 verse 12. And this is a fine line to walk. Okay, so I want you to listen carefully to me, but understand I'm going to explain the fine line in a moment. So in 2 Samuel chapter 16, if you remember the story of David's son Absalom had decided that he deserved to be king. He should be king of Israel. And so he had now attempted to usurp the kingship from David, and he'd actually drummed up a fair amount of support. And so in 2 Samuel chapter 16, David is traveling with his men, and he comes upon a man of the family of the house of Saul. So this was a man who was of the house of Saul, and he came out and he was cursing David continually as he came. And he actually threw stones at David and the servants of King David, and he cursed them. He said, get out, you man of blood, you base fellow. So here David and his servants, are coming along, and here comes this man from the house of Saul, and he starts to throw stones at David and at his servants. Now, can you imagine a figure, an authoritative figure, or a figure in leadership today, or a royal figure today, coming along anywhere, and one of us being able to stand at the side of the road and throw stones at them with no kind of retribution? I mean, that just would never be possible. But here this man is doing this. So David's nephew says to the king, why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over and take off his head. So basically, the nephew is saying, listen, let me just deal with him and sort him out. And David says to him, what have I done to you? Basically, I'm paraphrasing here. What have I done to you? And then he says, if he is cursing, because the Lord said to him, curse David, who then shall ask, why have you done so? So David is saying to his nephew, what if the Lord has told him to curse me? Then who am I to question why he's doing that? And then he basically says that Absalom is seeking his life. And he says, if my own son who is born to me seeks my life, with how much more reason now may this Benjamite do it? Because obviously David had, taken the kingship from Saul. Leave him alone and let him curse, for the Lord has bidden him to do it. And then in verse 12, David says, it may be that the Lord will look on the iniquity done to me and will recompense me with good for his cursing this day. Now remember, I said to you in my prophetic word, it was either in that prophetic word or it was in a separate teaching, that we were in a season of restoration, reconciliation, and restitution, or recompense. Restitution, it's the same thing. So David is basically saying that maybe the Lord will look on this iniquity done to me, and he will basically recompense me. He will provide me with restitution. If this is not God's will, that this man curses me, then God will ensure that I am compensated for the curses that have been placed on my life. And if you read further in the chapter, we're not going to go further, but if you read further in the chapter, as David and his men kept on going, this man kept on. He walked alongside them, throwing stones at them, throwing dust at them, and cursing them the whole way. And David didn't do a thing, because he knew that vengeance is the Lord's, not his. So you might be saying to me, yes, okay, fine. That was in those days. It was very different then. How do we apply that to our lives today? I'm glad you asked the question. If we go to Romans 12, verse 17 to 19. Romans 12, verse 17 to 19 says, repay no one evil for evil, but take thought for what is honest and proper and noble, aiming to be above reproach in the sight of everyone. If possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave the way open for God's wrath, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay or requite, says the Lord. And then it actually goes on to say in verse 20, but if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him drink. For by so doing, you will heap burning coals upon his head. It goes on to say that. So what I'm saying is we need to just look at these verses, okay? Because whilst we are not in an age where we challenge people to duels at dawn or anything, the weapon we all use in this day and age, of the internet, in this day and age of social media, the weapon we all use are words. Words. We don't draw swords, we don't haul out guns, we don't do those things, so we don't see this as vengeance, but we use words. We use our words. And do you know the sad thing is that in Romans, it says aiming to be above reproach in the sight of everyone. And yet, if you look at social media content, if you look at the things people say, if you look at the things people say about other people, and you look to see if there is any difference between the church and the world, if there is any difference between believers and unbelievers, there is so little difference. We seem to feel that it is okay to completely slander and just take down people who don't agree with our opinions, with our words. And somehow we seem to think that because we're just using words, that's okay. Because we're not, we have this very kind of evangelical take on sin. You know, what sins are worse? We kind of, in our minds, we have sort of levels of sin, you know, and murder is a really bad sin. But murdering someone with your words isn't as bad. And you know, you can't find any basis for that in the Bible. Nowhere in the Bible does God say, this sin is this sin is really bad, this sin is less bad, this sin. He doesn't. He says sin is sin. Sin separates you from God. He doesn't specify specific sins. He just says sin. And what did Jesus say? If you even think it, it's the same as actually doing it. And then you look at some of the things that people write online and you think, have they read those particular words? We are all so sure that our opinion is the right opinion and that we have the right, and we do have the right. We have the right to share our opinion. But as a believer whose life and whose expression of faith and whose expression of Jesus is supposed to be above reproach, I would say that we don't have the right to behave the way we behave with our words. And we speak death over people, over communities, over nations, over ourselves, constantly with our words. And we forget that it also says in Proverbs, the life and death lie in the power of the tongue. Because you can speak life over yourself, you can speak life over your situation, you can speak life over your country, you can speak life over your nation, or you can speak death. Now, understand something. What I'm not saying, don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that you live in some kind of idealistic space where everything is perfect and we only speak good and we never acknowledge the things that are bad, and where we think that if we just keep repeating the good stuff, the bad stuff will just go away. No, that's just silly. I'm not expecting anybody to be Pollyanna about anything. It's a case of just framing your words in such a way that you can speak life over a situation, even though the situation may look absolutely horrendous. In South Africa, we have huge issues with corruption. Okay, our government, our civil service, there is just everywhere you look, there is corruption. And it is so easy to just speak corruption over our nation and speak corruption over our government as we speak, instead of saying that we recognize there is a spirit of corruption that has some kind of stronghold over our nation, and yet we know that God puts the governments in place, and God has a plan for South Africa, and God has a plan for Africa, and God is bigger than that. And what do we do, Jesus, to take down that spirit? How do we take, that's rather than just be saying things like, oh, South Africa is going to be the next Zimbabwe, which is actually really mean to say about Zimbabwe, actually, as well. People say things like that all the time, but you are framing your nation in a very specific way, and your words carry power. And if you're prophetic or a prophet, your words carry even more power, and you have to be even more careful about what you say, about what actually comes forth out of your mouth. When you speak about your children, when you speak about your families, when you speak about your communities, when you speak about your church, when you speak about your nation, it is so imperative to be so careful about what words come out your mouth. Not denial. We don't live in denial. We don't live in a space where we pretend things aren't happening. We just ask the Holy Spirit for wisdom and revelation in how to frame what comes forth out of our mouths. Okay, right. Let's move on quickly to 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 15. 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 15 says, "See that none of you repays another with evil for evil, but always aim to show kindness and seek to do good to one another and to everybody." See that none of you repays another with evil for evil, but always aim to show kindness and seek to do good to one another and to everybody. And again, we tend to always read these verses in terms of physical acts. Not ignoring the homeless person begging at the robots, but giving him a 5 rand, showing kind. But we don't often think about it in terms of the words that we use. And understand another thing. As a person who came out of an abusive marriage, okay, I came out of a marriage which was filled with domestic abuse, okay. As a person who came out of an abusive marriage, I am not suggesting to anybody here that you be a doormat. I seem to, because of my history and my life, I seem to attract people with narcissistic tendencies into my space. It just, God is doing something in that space. But and I see it because I lived under it for such a long time. I see it. And then how do I deal with that? So I am not going to be a doormat. I will never be a doormat again. Not ever. I'm never going to be bullied or abused or cut down or pulled down or any of those things ever again. That I know. But I have to be strong and courageous, and yet I cannot repay evil for evil. I cannot just speak words. So it comes down to boundaries. Okay, basically that's the point. It comes down to boundaries. It comes down to the boundaries, and we are entitled to put boundaries down in our lives. We are entitled to draw boundaries and say to people who are unsafe, you are not allowed in this space because you are unsafe for me. We are entitled to do that. We are expected to do that. God never doesn't ask us to just take abuse or to just accept being badly treated. And I think somewhere along the line that became part of, the whole thing, especially for women, with women in abusive marriages who have been to see their pastors or leaders in their churches to be told, you need to be more submissive or you need to pray for him more. Absolute rubbish. rubbish. That's not God's best for you. That is not God's best for you. And so there comes a time when you have to stand up in God's strength for yourself as God's daughter, knowing that you're entitled to be treated a certain way. But it's how. It's how the words come out your mouth. It's the attitude of your heart. How is your heart positioned at that time? I've been divorced for 17 years now from my first husband, and forgiving him is still a constant thing in my life because I have 3 boys and my ex-husband is their dad, and so, but his, yeah, so the things that he does and the things that he says, and I'm constantly having to forgive him. And I'm constantly having to have conversations with my boys around how to deal with him and how, and I'm constantly having to watch my words. And please understand this, I don't get it right all the time. I don't even think I get it right 50% of the time. There are times when, your emotions just, and you just, and then I have to be like, okay, Lord, you forgive, So, but I just think that, so no one is asking you to be a doormat. No one is asking you to just lie down and let the world just trample all over you. That's not what Jesus did. That's not what Jesus did. But just ask God for wisdom and revelation as to how you frame the words that need to be said in that space. Okay, right. The last verse we're going to have a look at is 1 Peter 3 verse 9. 1 Peter 3 verse 9 says, just one more thing about the above reproach thing. And this is a little digression because, just because it's something God has been talking to me about. So that whole thing about being above reproach, I think that for a lot of in a lot of the church space, the body of Christ space, the kind of gospel of grace has made people forget that there is an expectation that as a believer, you live a life that is above reproach. Now, there is grace. We all know that. God's mercies are new every morning. But there is still a standard that we are expected to live up to, because are we not supposed to be emulating Christ? And so that verse of being above reproach, God has really been speaking to me about it, because with that comes excellence. And I think excellence is a word that people don't really enjoy anymore, because it makes them think of perfectionism, and it makes people feel as though that if you're trying to do things with excellence, you're striving and it's coming from a space of works. But God has been speaking to me about how He is excellent. And he is perfect, and he is perfection personified, basically. So his excellence is in his perfection, and yet we are supposed to be emulating him, wanting to be as he is. And how can we not do that if we are not doing things with excellence? And I read something the other day. For those of you who don't know, I am studying at my ripe old age. I am doing sorry, what's wrong with my tongue this morning? It's all of this talk about words. I am doing a bachelor's in theology, and I am busy actually if you pray for me this week, I'm writing exams and finishing assignments that are due on Monday. So just, if you remember me in your prayers, just pray for extra wisdom and extra, I haven't, exams. I mean, at my age, can you believe it? But anyway, I'm going off. But what I'm saying is, I was reading, so one part of the reading that I had to do, there was this one scholar who wrote that in scholarly circles, so in circles of, studies and things like that, evangelicals are not seen as excellent. So evangelicals is a very broad kind of label. It basically includes kind of the Pentecostals and the charismatics and all of those people. But they are not seen in scholarly circles. They are not seen as working with excellence. Apparently it has improved over the last some years, but it's still because it's the overarching kind of impression is that evangelicals do not value excellence. And God has just been speaking to me about how we need to be above reproach. The world needs to see a difference between the unbeliever and the believer. And how are they going to see that if we do not live lives that look different? So we need to, coming from a place of rest, not coming from a place of performance or works or striving, coming from a place where we know there is grace everlasting for us, we still need to be emulating Christ and being excellent in all that we do and all that we say. That was just a little side step. Okay, so we're looking at 1 Peter 3 verse 9, which says, "Never return evil for evil or insult for insult, scolding, tongue-lashing, berating, but on the contrary, blessing, praying for their welfare, happiness, and protection, and truly pitying and loving them. For know that to this you have been called, that you may yourselves inherit a blessing from God, that you may obtain a blessing as heirs, bringing welfare and happiness and protection." So basically what Peter is saying in 1 Peter 3 verse 9 is that never returning evil for evil or insult for insult, if focusing on our words, focusing on the fact that our words are supposed to bring life and not death, focusing on all of those things, we can actually live in the assurance that we will obtain or inherit a blessing from God if we put ourselves in a space where we can actually pray blessing over the people who have hurt us, where we can pray for their welfare, pray for their happiness, pray for their protection, and truly pity and love them with the love of Jesus. We don't have to love them, that warm, mushy feeling that we feel inside, but love them with the love of Jesus. I don't think Jesus' love is warm and mushy. I think it's very strong and powerful. And so if you go back to Proverbs 20, verse 22, that says, "Do not say, I will repay evil. Wait expectantly for the Lord, and he will rescue you." The promise in Proverbs is that if you do not repay evil for evil, if you wait expectantly, God will rescue you. Do you notice it doesn't say he might, or you'll think about it, or possibly, maybe this time, maybe next time. It doesn't say any of those things. It says wait expectantly for the Lord, and he will rescue you. So there's no prevarication in that verse. There's no possible or maybe or I don't know or what. It's a statement. He will rescue you. And then we look at all of those other cross references, and we come to this space in 1 Peter 3 verse 9, where he a bit more and expands on it a little bit more, basically saying that if you can do these things, then you know that to this you have been called, that you may yourselves inherit a blessing. Sorry about that. I don't know what's going on with the internet today. It happens like this every now and again. Anyway, so it is a verse or an instruction or a command, if you want to call it that comes with a promise. That if you don't return evil for evil, if you allow vengeance to be the Lord's, if you pray for and bless and all of those things, your enemies, and I think we use the word enemies and we all think to ourselves, we don't have enemies per se, but the people in your lives who are just difficult to love, or who are narcissistic, or who have been abusive, all of those things. If you can make sure that the words that come out of your mouth are framed in the wisdom and the revelation and the love of God, you will inherit a blessing. God will rescue you. There will be restitution. There will be recompense. There will be restoration. There will be reconciliation. And understand also that reconciliation doesn't always mean, I forgive you, you forgive me, now you come back into my life and you do all those same things that you did to me the first time all over again. That doesn't mean that you allow people back into your space so they can trample on you again or hurt you again. No. That doesn't mean that. It means that you can look at someone on the other side of your boundary and be like, you know what? I can pray blessing over you. I have forgiven you. I can love you with the love of the Lord. I don't have to allow you back into my space to repeat what you've done before. So it is just a time. And ladies, I know, and gentlemen, Stu, ladies and gentlemen, I know that these words and these teachings have not been easy, because I keep getting messages from people saying, sure, that was a hard one, but it was good. And if we as individual believers want to be part of the remnant that is going to rise up out of the church, out of the body of believers that are going to be set apart, consecrated unto God, clean hands and pure hearts, that we are going to be able to stand before the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords and say, here we are, use us, send us, then we need to be seen to be different. And if we need to be seen to be different, if you have a burning desire to be like Jesus, to be part of the remnant, to be preparing the bride, then these are things that we have to first take on board personally as individuals, and then speak them out over our families, speak them out over my boys know. My boys know, because Flynn is so good at this, my husband Flynn. He's so good at this. At the whole thing about not speaking death, but speaking life. He will often say to me, Sally, speak life over yourself, because there's no person that I speak death over more than my own self. And I think a lot of women are like that. And my boys know. They say something, and then they say, no, that's we speak in death. We need to speak life. They know. They know, they tell their friends, that you need to speak words that bring life. Because we say it to them over and over again. And if all of us do that with our children, if all of us did that in our communities, if all of us did that in our nation, imagine where we could be. Imagine where we could be. So ladies, I just want to bless you once again. Never has there been a time more to be as wise as serpents and as gentle as doves. And I think that women specifically have spent many years being as gentle as doves, but it's time to be as wise as serpents. And that is a biblical thing. I didn't make that up. So we are called to be as wise as serpents and as gentle as doves. So you can be both. And I just release over you just wisdom and revelation straight from the throne room of God, to know exactly how to frame your words in the situations that you need to frame them, to know exactly how to say what needs to be said in the situations you face. I release that wisdom and revelation over you in the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, to be able to speak the words that need to be heard in the best way possible. I release the power over you to frame with words your family, your community, your church. I release just the blessing that goes with that, the inherited blessing that goes with that. And I release the power and the wisdom and the revelation over each one of you to frame our nation in the way that God sees it and not in the way it looks in the natural. That we will call those things that are not as if they were, and we will see them manifest through the transformative glory and power of God. I just bless you with that this morning, each and every one of you. And if, for those of you who don't know, if you are still longing for more teaching, it goes live at 8 o'clock every morning on Facebook. I do Tuesdays and Thursdays at 7. Rose does every morning at 8. She's amazing. So feel free to go and listen to her at 8 o'clock and the pearls of wisdom that she brings straight from God. So I bless you all. I love you all. Thank you so much for joining me again this morning. I will see you all next Tuesday at 7 a.m. We will continue our journey, and hopefully the internet will behave next week. Love you lots. Mwah. See you soon.